we did our first story about Screams Without Words, the New York Times communications department sent us like a ripping email demanding retractions, corrections, etc. And among the things that they demanded that we correct is that Adam Sella, the most junior reporter on that story, bylined on that story,
which is saying a lot, because Anat Schwartzman had never written a damn piece of journalism in her life.
Well,
Anat
junior
Schwartz,
because it was Anat Schwartz's cousin.
Right. Okay. Well, hold on. Wait a minute.
Okay,
You're gonna get a letter from the New York Times because this is not correct.
Okay.
So what we said was that Adam Sella is Anat Schwartz's nephew. He had been a food blogger, and then he all of a sudden was put in charge. One of the people put in charge of a massive New York Times investigation alleging that Hamas went into Israel with a systematic rape plan. Mm-hmm. So they have the food blogger who ends up on the byline with Jeffrey Gettleman and Anat Schwartz. So we reported that he was her nephew. Well, they said, no, this is not accurate because Anat Schwartz and it's her partner's nephew, and Anat Schwartz is not married to him. They are just domestic partners. So this is false.
Damn.
So in our newsroom,
it's her nephew in common law.
You can see. So in our newsroom, we had this argument.
Owned.
We had this argument about like, should we actually correct this? This is insane to say that like, oh, well, sorry, it's not her nephew. It's her partner that she's not married to nephew. And I was the one who said, no, absolutely. We should issue that correction. 100%. We should go over the top. We regret this grave error that we've made in our piece. But
you should do a Notes app apology with it too. You know, that's you put it out on Twitter. Jesus, I can't believe we could be so, just
my confession video. Dear readers,
we apologize.
To tell you, I made a horrible error. I misidentified Anat Schwartz's partner's nephew as her nephew, and it undermines the entire credibility of our piece about their valiant piece of journalism that was robbed of the Pulitzer Prize.
Well, exactly. our notepad with the exact relationship had been somehow smeared with semen, so that we couldn't read the accurate relationship. Boom. Oof.
Ryan seems to have made the right decision to end his participation in the bad Hasbara show.
Yes.
But that's so. I mean, the one thing I don't think I'll ever understand is what the general corporate, or it's not even a corporate culture, but the culture of journalism in general, in which you have these giant news organizations like the New York Times who are doing stuff like refusing to correct or retract something that has been proven as false reporting. What is it like in the journalism, in the world that you're in?
I can tell you what we heard from people within the New York Times.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in, because I know there are people.
I'm talking about whistleblowers, like people within the New York Times. And I mean, we don't need to get into all the details of this, but we also published I'm just saying, just for time's sake, people can look it up. We did a series of stories based on, people within the New York Times newsroom talking to us about what was going on there. And it spurred a witch hunt where the New York Times that did an internal investigation to try to figure out who was leaking, to us. And it started with a story that we did at The Intercept about the podcast The Daily, and how how their episode about Screams Without Words didn't clear their fact check process.
Right.
But we also spoke to other people within the New York Times newsroom who said that the paper was obsessed with awards. And, if you have to issue retractions on pieces, it makes it very hard to keep going with the Pulitzer prizes. Although the George Polk Award did include Screams Without Words in its package that was awarded the Polk Award this year. So it did get, it was part of the package that won the Polk Award. It did not win the Pulitzer. But also,
we try not to reference The Wire on every episode, but God damn it, this is season 5.
Yes.
Exactly. I could see that parallel. But the end of this is that I think also that there was this panic that if they have to walk back this story and they have to admit that it was built on a platform of sand, that just was kind of collapsing under the lightest bit of weight or pressure.
Yeah.
That this then was going to be perceived as the New York Times retracting that there were any rapes whatsoever that occurred on October 7th. And I think
Can't
that,
have that.
you know, well, and you know, one of the things, you cannot make decisions about whether to correct factual errors based on any factors other than whether they're true or not. I mean, this is just basic journalism.
I think
and
it's beyond that,
all
too.
of us have fucked up. All of us have had to issue. It's not fun. It's not pleasant, especially if you do a high stakes story and you have to say, "Oh my God, we got it wrong."
Sure.
You have to own it. There's to this moment refusing to correct verifiably, demonstrably false things that they reported.
Well, so I think it's that. I think number one, also it's that they don't want to get yelled at, continue to get yelled at by camera. It seems like that they're always going to be on their ass. But also, I think to retract or to correct this story is, you know, to admit its part in the continued genocide
100%.
of Gaza. Because this
story was so central.
It was central. It was part and parcel to the ramping up and being allowing Israel to continue to do their bloodletting. You know,
and you had these two moments that I think, you know, were turning points is not the right phrase, but that were key moments where propaganda really saved the day for the genocide that Israel was intent on committing.
Mm-hmm.
One was when the Biden administration co-signed the lies about the Hamas Pentagon being underneath Al-Shifa Hospital.
Yeah.
And when the U.S. came forward and said, we have our own independent intelligence, that this is true, that gave the green light to Israel to then systematically go after all these hospitals and medical facilities in Gaza and destroy, you know, or severely damage every single one of them. And then the second was when, you know, at the very end, just a few days before New Year's, Screams Without Words gets published. And it was at a moment when you really started to see a rise in global outrage. You had even European countries that were allies of Israel starting to use stark terms about the killing of babies. Even Trudeau in Canada was starting to say things that are like uncharacteristically strong for him. And he's been all in with this the whole time.
Yeah.
So at key moments, these kinds of events ended up putting more fuel in the genocide vehicle. And, you know, I'm not saying Netanyahu and Biden and company wouldn't have continued, but you can go back through these 9+ months and find this trail of propaganda crumbs.
That's right.
That were laid at decisive moments to ensure that it would continue.
Yes.
With assists from people like Hillary Clinton and Sheryl Sandberg and, you know,
Joe Biden and
exactly. You know, and I think that's exactly right. That it's not so much that the most horrifying thing about suggesting that there was no sexual violence on October 7th, if in fact there was, would be disrespect to the victims or to the families. No, it would be revealing that what the rest of our paper has been doing actively is participating in this genocide.
It's
helping
not
it to happen.
Yeah. But also on this issue, and again, like I have never said, oh, I know with certainty that there was no sexual violence on October 7th. If I have to, sort of theorize about it, I would be surprised if there wasn't, just based on my experience. But I'm not going to run around banging pots and pans about atrocities that we don't have documented evidence for.
And no forensic evidence for a planned, coordinated, systemic thing.
For sure, this systematic, this narrative about a systematic, predetermined thing has absolutely no basis in fact that anyone has presented. But in a way, it's also similar to the discourse around the Hannibal doctrine, where the question of to what extent did Israel intentionally kill or injure its own citizens to prevent them from being brought back to Gaza. It's also relevant to the discussion about the shelling of houses in some of the kibbutzim and the number of Israelis that were killed at the hands of their own forces, high-powered weapons from either helicopters or tanks. You can make an argument, or part of the argument should also be that all people who died on that day, and this is also true of the tens of thousands of Palestinians who've been murdered with US weapons and support, everyone who died during the course of this, their families deserve to have some understanding of what happened to their loved ones. And just, even if you want to look at this purely from the perspective of the family members of Israelis who died on October 7th, they should be provided answers that are real and factual from their own government about the extent to which orders were given to launch operations that they knew were going to kill Israeli civilians. That's one part of this argument. But the other part of it is, to what extent does Israel know that certain incidents of violence or killing that occurred were done at the hands of Israeli forces? From the beginning, we were initially told 2,000 people were killed that day. We were told that the overwhelming majority of people killed were civilians. And then when you start to look at the actual Israeli official numbers, it gets down to around a little bit more than 1,130 people died that day. Israelis and foreigners who were resident in Israel. You had several hundred soldiers who died that day. You had 695 Israelis that were identified as civilians and 75 foreigners who were identified as civilians. When you start to look at the factual reality of this, then it allows you to make a different sort of assessment of what happened that day. I don't think Hamas or Palestinians or anyone involved with this should be absolved of any questions about why they did certain things that they did. But what I won't participate in is pretending that there wasn't a 76-year political and historical context to the October 7th attacks. And I won't pretend that a single thing that happened on October 7th justified anything that we have seen since then that's been supported by the US government. And if that makes me whatever Canary and all these other groups want to say, they can have at it on Twitter. I really don't care, because facts actually matter.
Yeah. I agree with you completely, and I'm jealous that you get to be on Canary Mission and I'm still not on there.
I had never even heard of this, except I'd never even heard of this thing until they made this video with me and Ali Abu Nima and I don't know who else.
They're mostly doxing college students and academics. That was their thing for a while.
I hope they don't get into my dorm room. That would be problematic for me.
Yeah, then they'll prank you so hard in your dorm room. Thank you so much for watching that. Please like and subscribe, and please support us. Patreon.com/badhasbara or go to badhasbara.com.